at a bustling construction site on the outskirts of town. The day began like any other, machines roaring, drills screaming, and the clang of metal filling the air. Dust floated in the heat, workers shouted over the noise, and everyone was focused on pouring concrete for the foundation of a new building. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, a small, muddy puppy darted onto the site. No collar, no tag, just big eyes full of desperation, and a shrill bark that refused to be ignored. At first, no one paid attention. Stray dogs were common around the area, often looking for scraps or a shady spot to rest. But this puppy was different. He barked with purpose, tugging at pant legs, pawing at boots, even yelping at the foreman from a distance. One worker laughed nervously when the pup tried to nip at his glove. But as the moments passed and the dog kept returning, more urgent, more desperate, something clicked. This wasn't aimless wandering. He was trying to tell them something. Something was terribly wrong. Supervisor Malik, a no-nonsense man known for running a tight, efficient site, had just stepped out his trailer when he noticed a commotion. The puppy was still there, yipping, pacing in circles, then dashing to a pile of gravel before racing back, over and over. Each time, his barks grew louder, more desperate. Malik paused, frowning. He watched as the tiny dog zigzagged between equipment, kicking up dust with his frantic paws. It wasn't random. There was direction to it, urgency. Either he's lost, Malik muttered to himself, rubbing the back of his neck, or he's trying to tell us something. He wasn't the type to waste time on distractions, but something in the dog's behavior struck him deep, something too human to ignore. He waved over two nearby workers. "Come on," he said firmly, following the pup. The puppy didn't hesitate. He darted ahead with lightning speed, leading them toward an unused corner of the site. Weeds sprouted through broken concrete, and old boards were stacked high. It was quiet here, eerily quiet. The noise of the construction faded behind them. Malik's boots crunched against gravel as the three men moved quickly. The puppy stopped beside a narrow trench near the edge of the lot, looked back at them, and let out one sharp, piercing bark, as if saying, "Look," tucked behind a haphazard stack of wooden planks, next to a trench partially filled with drying concrete. Malik and the workers finally saw what the puppy had been trying so desperately to show them. A medium-sized mother dog lay trapped, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. Her back legs were submerged in the thick, gray mix that had already started to harden. Cement clung to her fur like armor, weighing her down, pulling at her limbs. Only her upper body remained free, though barely. Each movement looked painful, every breath labored. Her eyes, wide and glassy, were locked not on the men, but on the tiny puppy at her side. He whimpered beside her, pawing uselessly at the edge of the trench. She had clearly been there for hours, maybe all night, judging by the hardened edges of the cement. Her muzzle was coated in dust, her ears pinned back in fear and confusion. She didn't bark. She didn't growl. She simply stared, pleadingly, silently. One of the workers gasped, taking a step forward. "She's stuck," he murmured. She'd been trying to claw her way out. Scratch marks lined the edge of the trench, where her front paws had thrashed in vain. The air around them was thick with the sharp smell of drying cement. Malik's stomach turned. If they had ignored the puppy even a few minutes longer, she might not have survived at all. A jolt of panic surged through Malik as he realized the gravity of the situation. The concrete was setting fast, and if they didn't act quickly, the mother dog could lose her legs, or worse. Without hesitation, he grabbed his radio and called for backup, his voice urgent and uncharacteristically shaken. "We need assistance near the West Trench. Bring water, warm if you've got it, and tools. Now." Within minutes, more workers arrived, some carrying buckets, others clutching shovels, crowbars, and whatever else they could find. One man tried using a hammer to chip away at the hardened edges, but the sharp clang made the mother dog flinch violently. He stopped immediately, heart pounding. "We'll hurt her if we keep doing this," he said. Another worker stepped in with a more delicate approach. Warm water, slowly poured around the dog's back legs in an attempt to soften the cement. The little puppy didn't sit still for a moment. He paced anxiously around the trench, whining, then licking his mother's muzzle before circling again. He pawed at the gravel, tried digging with his tiny feet, and barked when no one moved fast enough. It was as if he understood time was running out. The mother dog let out a faint whimper, her breathing shallow, her body beginning to slump under the weight of the concrete. The urgency in the air was thick. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a race against solid stone. In a moment that would be remembered longer than any building they'd ever raise. Even the toughest, most seasoned men on site fell silent. Hammers were set down. Engines were cut off. Voices hushed. And then, without a single order, everyone moved. Not toward the blueprint or the scaffolding, but toward her, toward the dog. A few workers got on their knees, hands deep in gravel and sludge, gently digging around her trapped legs with whatever they could find, trowels, glove fingers, even coffee mugs. Others ran to their trucks and returned with tarps, holding them up to block the scorching midday sun from her exposed body. Sweat poured down faces, not from labor but from urgency and care. The massive cement mixer, which had been churning relentlessly all morning, was shut down with one decisive twist of a lever. Silence took its place, broken only by the sound of dripping water and the soft whimpers of the mother dog. No one said, "This isn't our job." No one asked, "What's the point?" Because in that instant, blueprints and deadlines meant nothing. A life needed saving. And even though the rescue had nothing to do with construction, no productivity, no pay, it was something deeper, something older, something human. Nearly an hour had passed. 60 long minutes filled with cautious digging, careful scraping, and gentle streams of warm water poured over hardened concrete. Hands were raw, clothes caked with dust and sweat. Every movement was slow, precise, and full of hope. The workers formed a circle around her, like surgeons in an outdoor operating room, protecting the fragile life they were determined to save. Finally, with one last tug and a gasp from the group, her back legs slid free. The mix had taken fur and skin with it. Her hind legs were raw, scraped, bleeding, but she was out. She didn't bark or struggle. Instead, as they laid her gently on the cool earth, she exhaled a shaky breath and collapsed beside her puppy. The little one wasted no time. He pressed himself against her, licking her ears, whining softly as if trying to soothe her pain. The mother's eyes closed briefly, not in defeat, but in relief. Malik, standing nearby, knelt down beside them. The gruffness in his face was gone. His jaw tightened, and he blinked hard, his voice low and thick with emotion. "She would have died," he whispered, glancing at the puppy, "if it weren't for him." No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The puppy had saved his mother's life, against all odds, in a world of steel and stone. Nearly an hour had passed. 60 long minutes filled with cautious digging, careful scraping, and gentle streams of warm water poured over hardened concrete. Hands were raw, clothes caked with dust and sweat. Every movement was slow, precise, and full of hope. The workers formed a circle around her, like surgeons in an outdoor operating room, protecting the fragile life they were determined to save. Finally, with one last tug and a gasp in the group, her back legs slid free. The mix had taken fur and skin with it. Her hind legs were raw, scraped, bleeding, but she was out. She didn't bark or struggle. Instead, as they laid her gently on the cool earth, she exhaled a shaky breath and collapsed beside her puppy. The little one wasted no time. He pressed himself against her, licking her ears, whining softly as if trying to soothe her pain. The mother's eyes closed briefly, not in defeat, but in relief. Malik, standing nearby, knelt down beside them. The gruffness in his face was gone. His jaw tightened, and he blinked hard, his voice low and thick with emotion. "She would have died," he whispered, glancing at the puppy, "if it weren't for him." No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. The puppy had saved his mother's life, against all odds, in a world of steel and stone. Once the mother dog was stabilized, Malik didn't hesitate. He and 2 others gently lifted her onto a makeshift stretcher fashioned from a board and an old blanket. The puppy trotted beside them, never leaving her side. They loaded both into a worker's truck and rushed to the nearest veterinary clinic, hearts pounding with urgency and hope. The vet, surprised but deeply touched by the story, worked quickly. After thorough exam, he confirmed what everyone prayed for. The mother dog, though bruised, scraped, and severely exhausted, would make a full recovery with time, rest, and proper care. The concrete hadn't done permanent damage. She had likely been scavenging for food late at night and slipped into the trench before the cement began to set. The thought made Malik's stomach turn. He looked down at the little pup, still alert, watching every move the vet made. Then, without fanfare, Malik did something no one expected. He turned to the others and said, "They're not going back to the street." He paused, then added with quiet firmness, "They're not strays anymore. They're part of this crew now." The room fell silent for a moment, then filled with quiet nods and smiles. Malik, a man who had never owned a pet and rarely smiled at all, was now a father too, one muddy hero of a puppy and one resilient, strong-hearted mother. Weeks later, the construction site had returned to its usual rhythm, machines humming, tools clanging, voices calling across scaffolding. But something was different now. 2 new members had unofficially joined the crew. The once muddy puppy, now well-fed and lively, trotted confidently between boots and wheelbarrows, his tail wagging like a flag. The workers had named him Brick, a nod to his strength and the grit he'd shown. His mother, still healing but far stronger than before, was christened Bella. She spent her days lounging in a shaded spot near the foreman's trailer, always watching, always calm. When Brick darted off after birds or played tug-of-war with discarded glove, Bella's eyes followed, her ears twitching protectively. Everyone knew their story. They weren't mascots. They were reminders. A hand-painted sign now stood near the trench where it had all happened. It read simply, "This site was saved by a puppy's bark. Never ignore a cry for help." And no one ever did again.